The palace was quieter after midnight. Not silent. Palaces are never truly silent. There are pipes behind old walls, floorboards settling beneath carpets, a distant door closing, the measured footsteps of staff trained to move through rooms without becoming part of them. And somewhere inside that world, according to a story now repeated online, a member of the household staff found Diana alone. No cameras, no photographers waiting beyond the gates. No Prince of Wales beside her. Just Diana and a woman whose job required her to notice everything and repeat almost nothing. The maid supposedly asked a simple question. "What are you most afraid of?" Diana did not answer immediately. The story says she looked toward the doorway, as though even an empty corridor might be listening. Then she said something the maid would remember for the rest of her life. It is exactly the kind of scene people believe about Diana, because it feels true. But feeling true and being documented are not the same thing. I could find no reliable primary source proving that an identifiable palace maid asked Diana those exact words, or that Diana gave one dramatic answer in response. No authenticated recording. No contemporary diary entry, no named maid whose testimony establishes that precise conversation. So, we are not going to invent her, because something more revealing survives in the archive. Diana did speak about fear. Friends remembered it. People who worked around her saw it. Her sons later described the atmosphere surrounding her final years, and when Diana's own private conversations are placed beside those accounts, one fear appears repeatedly. It was not losing a palace, it was not losing a title, it was not even losing Charles, it was losing the people she believed were truly hers, William and Harry, and beneath even that fear was something older, being left behind. Again, to understand why, we have to rewind. Before Buckingham Palace, before the wedding, before millions of people knew her face. Diana Frances Spencer was born on the Berenice de Loy 1961 and grew up inside an aristocratic family whose own marriage fractured during her childhood. Her parents separated when she was young. That experience did not automatically determine everything that followed, and it would be irresponsible to reduce an adult life to one childhood wound. But people close to Diana later described abandonment as an enduring emotional theme. Years after her divorce, a friend recalled Diana speaking of a terror not simply of death, but of being left alone again, of being returned to what she described emotionally as darkness. Hold that word alone, because it will return. In February 1981, Diana became engaged to Prince Charles. She was 19, Charles was 32. By July, they were married before an enormous worldwide audience. The public story had all the required ingredients. A future king, a young bride, a carriage, a cathedral, a dress so famous that people who were children at the time can still remember seeing it on TV. The fairy tale did what fairy tales do. It ended the story at the wedding. Real life began the next morning. Diana later described profound difficulties inside the marriage. She spoke publicly about isolation, bulimia, self-harm, and the strain created by Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. In her 1995 Panorama interview, she famously described the marriage as containing 3 people. Before we continue, let us know in the comments, what city are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And when the story is over, come back and tell us what you thought. We'd love to hear your honest review. Now, let's get back to the story. But there was another part of her life that she described very differently. Motherhood. Prince William was born on 21 June 1982. Prince Harry followed on the 15th of September 1984. From this point forward, almost every serious account of Diana's emotional life contains the same anchor. The boys. Not the crown. The boys, not royal approval. The boys, not preserving the appearance of the marriage at any cost. William and Harry. Diana's former dance teacher Anne Allen later remembered private conversations during a period when Diana's marriage was deteriorating. Allen described Diana crying over the possibility that her family might break apart. The sentence she remembered Diana saying was simple. "Keeping my family together is the most important thing to me." That sentence tells us more than the invented maid story ever could, because Diana was not speaking about constitutional position. She was speaking like a mother terrified of fragmentation. She had lived through one broken family as a child. Now she could see another one forming around her sons. And this is where the palace becomes important. Not because every person inside it was cruel, that would be too simple. The deeper problem was structural. Diana had married not only Charles but a system. Her husband was heir to the throne. Her eldest son was now second in line. William did not belong only to Diana in the ordinary sense a mother might imagine her child belonging within a private family. He had a constitutional future, schedules, protection officers, schools, royal residences, family traditions, public expectations. Harry lived inside that machinery too. Diana loved them as sons. The institution also understood them as princes. Those two realities could coexist while the marriage remained intact. Once the marriage collapsed, they became harder to separate. By the late 1980s, people around Diana could see the emotional pressure. A later account of William's childhood described one bitter argument between Charles and Diana at Highgrove, after which Diana shut herself in a bathroom. William, still a little boy, reportedly pushed tissues beneath the door because he could not bear hearing his mother upset. Think about that image. Not the princess. The mother? Not the heir. An 8-year-old boy sliding tissues under a bathroom door. That is what institutional history often misses. The monarchy records tours, marriages, births, titles, and succession. Children remember rooms. They remember voices through doors. They remember whether their mother was crying. Diana's marriage deteriorated further. On the 9th of December 1992, Prime Minister John Major announced in Parliament that Charles and Diana were separating. The separation was presented as having no constitutional implications for the succession. Diana continued her public duties and remained Princess of Wales. To the public, separation looked like freedom beginning. To Diana, freedom came with another question. What happens to the boys? There was no dramatic moment in which the palace simply removed William and Harry from her. The boys maintained relationships with both parents, but Diana increasingly feared losing control over when she saw them and how much influence she retained. This is not speculation based on a viral video. One of the starkest surviving recollections comes from designer Roberto Dvorak, a friend of Diana. After the divorce, according to a detailed Vanity Fair account, Diana complained that losing her HRH style had been followed by something emotionally more frightening. "They took my HRH title and now they are slowly taking my kids," she told him before describing being informed when she could have them. There it is. Not an anonymous maid. Not a candlelit invented confession. A named friend remembering Diana directly connecting status, separation and access to her children. And notice what she does not say. She does not say, "I want my title back." The title is evidence of something larger. Her fear is displacement, first from the marriage, then from royal status, then in her own frightened interpretation, perhaps from her sons. Whether every fear was objectively justified is a separate question. Fear does not require the feared event to be inevitable. It requires the person experiencing it to believe that something precious can be taken away. And Diana increasingly believed things could be taken away. Her marriage had taught her that. Her public position had taught her that. The press had taught her that. Sometimes even her own attempts to control her story had unintended consequences. In 1995, Diana agreed to the now famous BBC Panorama interview with Martin Bashir. Years later, the Dyson investigation concluded that Bashir had used deceptive methods to obtain access to Diana, including false documents. The BBC later apologized, and Prince William said those failures contributed to the fear, paranoia and isolation he remembered surrounding his mother during her final years. That later finding changes how the interview must be understood. Diana was speaking voluntarily, but she had also been manipulated by false information around the circumstances that led to the interview. Both things matter. What survives most powerfully is Diana's insistence that she wanted her sons to understand life beyond palace walls. In the interview, she described taking William and Harry to meet homeless people and people suffering from AIDS so that they would encounter experiences far removed from royal privilege. That was Diana's idea of motherhood. Protection did not mean hiding them from reality. It meant preparing them for it. She wanted William to become whatever history required without becoming emotionally distant from the people he might one day serve. She wanted Harry to understand the same world. This was one of the reasons losing influence over them frightened her. They were not simply the children she loved. They were also the part of royal life she believed she could shape differently. And now return to our imaginary maid. Imagine she asks, "What do you fear most?" The easy answer would be Charles leaving. But by the time the marriage had collapsed publicly, Charles had already emotionally moved away. The easy answer would be Camilla, but Camilla represented a wound Diana already understood. The easy answer would be losing the crown, yet Diana told Panorama she did not expect to become queen, and instead spoke of wanting to be a queen in people's hearts. The deeper answer was not a crown, it was separation. This is why the story of Diana's childhood matters. This is why William beneath the bathroom door matters. This is why Anne Allen remembering Diana desperate to hold her family together matters. This is why the Dvorak conversation matters. The evidence circles the same emotional center. Do not leave me, do not take them. Do not make my sons live the fracture I lived. Not anger, fear. And fear changed as Diana changed. Early in the marriage, it appears to have centered on losing Charles's affection and failing inside a role she desperately wanted to understand. Later, it centered on surviving the marriage. Later still, it centered on maintaining her relationship with William and Harry, while building an independent identity. The object changed. The underlying emotion remained remarkably familiar. Abandonment. But Diana was not merely frightened. That is where the public caricature fails. People who remember only the tears miss what she did with them. She kept working, Her royal career included extensive charitable involvement, and after divorce she reduced the number of organizations with which she was formally associated so that she could concentrate on selected causes. She touched AIDS patients publicly at a time when fear and misinformation still surrounded the illness. She worked with people affected by leprosy. She visited hospitals. And in January 1997 she walked through an active minefield in Angola, wearing protective equipment as part of her support for the campaign against landmines. Look at the photographs from Angola. They complicate the word afraid. Here is a woman whose private life contained enormous anxiety, walking carefully between warning signs in a landscape where mines had destroyed bodies. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear. Diana's life suggests something less cinematic. Courage can coexist with fear. Sometimes it is built from it. She knew what vulnerability felt like. That may help explain why she was drawn toward people whose vulnerability other members of society preferred not to see. The sick, the homeless, the marginalized. Children in hospitals, people whose injuries remained after wars had officially ended. She moved toward them, and yet, privately, her own sense of security remained fragile. That contradiction is Diana. Publicly brave, privately uncertain. Globally adored, personally afraid of being abandoned. Surrounded by people, afraid of being alone. Then came 1996. After years of separation, Charles and Diana's divorce was finalized on 28th of August. Diana retained the title Diana, Princess of Wales, but ceased to be styled Her Royal Highness. She continued to live at Kensington Palace and remained the mother of the second and third people then in line to the throne. The marriage was finally over. That should have been the end of the uncertainty. Instead, Diana was constructing a completely new life. Fewer official obligations, a changed household, new relationships, new causes, new possibilities. And still William and Harry moved between two worlds. Their father's future was inside the monarchy. Their mother's future was becoming harder to define. By the summer of 1997, William was 15, Harry was 12, Diana was 36. She could not have known how little time remained. We should be particularly careful here because Diana's final months have accumulated conspiracy theories, dramatic predictions and retrospective claims. Official investigations into the Paris crash did not establish that Diana was murdered by a royal conspiracy. Her death followed the crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris on the 31st of August 1997. The documented tragedy is sufficient. 2 boys lost their mother. And suddenly, the thing Diana had feared in one direction happened in the opposite direction. She had worried about losing them. They lost her. William was 15. Harry was 12. That is the aftershock that makes every earlier conversation about keeping her family together feel different. The boys went to bed with a mother alive somewhere in Europe. They woke into a world without her. Years later, William would speak publicly about the damage surrounding the Panorama interview and specifically remember his mother's fear, paranoia, and isolation during her final years. That word again, isolation, alone. The palace maid in the title may not be verifiable, but the question is, what did Diana fear? The archive does not offer one neat sentence labeled Diana's greatest fear. History rarely behaves that conveniently. Instead it gives us fragments. A dance teacher remembering Diana saying that keeping her family together mattered above everything. A friend remembering her anxiety that control over time with her children was narrowing. A son remembering fear and isolation. A former maid recalling how William and Harry tried to cope when their parents fought. Diana herself explaining that she deliberately exposed her sons to lives beyond privilege. Put those fragments together, not as courtroom proof of a single sentence, as a pattern. Diana feared losing connection to love, connection to family, connection to her sons, and perhaps most painfully, connection to the belief that she belonged somewhere permanently. She had entered royal life surrounded by certainty, titles, rules, hierarchy, tradition, but none of those things guaranteed the one thing she appears to have wanted most. Emotional security. That is the irony. She lived in buildings designed to survive centuries, and she rarely seemed certain that the relationships inside them would survive the year. So imagine the final image, not a maid standing beside Diana, not an invented confession. Kensington Palace, late evening, 2 framed photographs, William, Harry. The rooms around them enormous, formal, historic, the photographs small, personal, portable. That is where Diana's center was. Not the throne room, not the balcony, not the title on an envelope. The boys. And if someone truly had asked her what she feared most, perhaps no dramatic sentence could have carried the entire answer. Her life had already answered it. She feared being left. She feared losing the people she loved. And when the marriage failed, she feared that the machinery surrounding her children might slowly place them beyond her reach. But here is the part the tragedy cannot erase. It did not erase her from them. William and Harry grew up speaking publicly about their mother. Her photographs remained, her causes remained, her mistakes remained too, so did her voice. Not purified, not turned into a saint, preserved as something more valuable, human. Diana spent much of her life afraid that important people could disappear from her world. In the end, she was the one who disappeared from theirs. But memory did something the palace could not regulate. It kept bringing her back, in interviews, in photographs, in the way her sons spoke about her, in every person who remembers where they were when the news came from Paris. That is why her story does not need an invented maid to whisper the truth. The evidence already does, quietly, piece by piece. Diana's deepest battle was never simply against Camilla, Charles, the press, or the palace. It was against the old terror that love could be withdrawn and family could fracture without warning. She did not always defeat that fear. Sometimes it overwhelmed her. Sometimes it distorted the way she saw events. Sometimes other people exploited it. But sometimes she walked straight through it, into hospitals, onto public stages, across a minefield toward her sons. And that may be the most accurate way to remember her, not as a woman who was never afraid, as a woman who kept moving while she was.